The following episode of the Bubb Report comes to you compliments S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, a Caribbean family-owned funeral service. They offer a full range of funeral services at affordable prices in New York City. They can be reached on 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity. A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to yet another edition of the Bubb Report. And of course, this is the last Sunday of May in the year 2022. Of course, as I indicated in the beginning, the Bubb Report this week is being pre recorded as I am not available to host and facilitate the live program. For those of you in North America, you would be aware that this is Memorial Day weekend, and I'm taking some time for rest and relaxation with my family. And at this time, I wish to welcome our first guest, our spotlight guest for the report. And this is the second time I believe he's making a media appearance. But I've given Mr. Dowden the assurance that we here at the Bubb Report, we do things a little bit differently and we operate at a different journalistic standard. So we would be treating Mr. Dowden firmly but fairly, with a sense of balance and a sense of objectivity. So, Mr. Dowden, I want to take this time to welcome you to the report.
So,
Go ahead.
thank you, Dr. Bubb.
Yes.
It's my first time being on your program since you would have started. So thank you for inviting me and having me here, and also welcome to your listening audience, both home and in the diaspora. It's good to be on your program.
Absolutely, Mr. Dowden. Now, Mr. Dowden, you've already articulated on the political platform as well as in other media platforms why you left the NDC. So we're not going to relitigate what was already said. I am more interested, though, in finding out if you had a conversation with Prime Minister Dr. Keith Mitchell and the MP for the constituency of St. George Northwest over his homophobic attacks, in my view. I call them homophobic attacks that were leveled against you and another former colleague of yours. You said that you are a Christian, and as a Christian, you forgive. But has there been an apology from the offending party in this case? Or have you turned the other cheek?
So let me say this. First of all, when I made my decision in terms of lending support to Nimrod Olive as the candidate for St. George Northeast, it had absolutely nothing to do with me having any meetings with Dr. Mitchell or any apology taking place, right? I chose to support Nimrod personally because he's someone that I have known over the years and I've seen his work. Of course, since then, that would have led me to conversations with Dr. Mitchell, whereby we would have been able to have conversations, open and honest conversations. And one would realize upon reflection, once you're in competitive politics, people say things for different reasons against their competitors, and it has nothing, many times there's no truth to it. And so we have been able to acknowledge that, put that behind us, and at this point in time, focus on what is the better interests of the country. And that is ensuring that every single Grenadian, Caracunian, and Petit Martinique can have a better future and be able to own a piece of this rock. And so I have chosen not to look back at the past, but to focus on the future. And of course, as a Christian, I forgive him and anyone else that would have made those comments, and even NDC supporters that are currently making those comments.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I found it ironic that the people who were defending you were using the same type of rhetoric, the same type of homophobic
And
rhetoric,
and
leveled against you. And I would say this: it is not helpful on either side of the political aisle, and that creates a very toxic atmosphere, in my view, with respect to election cycles. But please proceed.
right, and I totally agree with you, but it also goes back to say that what I was saying, in the sense that in competitive politics, people tend to say and do strange things for whatever reasons. I guess to score political points or so forth. Of course, Dr. Mitchell said what he have said, and at least the point is we are able now to work together and put that behind us and forgive and move on. But it's amazing, of course, that the people who defended me, right? And of course, came out and they felt, of course, the comments that Dr. Mitchell would have made were very unfortunate. And they would have come down on him as well, rightly so at the time, that they're now doing the same to me, and even worse, right? Some of them repeat it every day. They taunt me when I pass on the streets. But I just decide to turn the other cheek because I understand the political season that we're in, and it's very politically charged. And eventually, people, I believe, would come to their senses after the election and realize that, listen, those comments are unfortunate, and I have not done them anything. I can understand Dr. Mitchell and why he would have made those comments, because of course I was his competitor in the seat. But to some normal supporter that's just supporting their party, the NDC, I've not done them anything wrong. I see no reason why they should make those comments. But to each his own. That is human beings, and sometimes we do very strange things, and sometimes we just cannot understand us as humans. We can be very sophisticated and complicated all in one.
But don't you think there is a case to be made for the leaders of the two main political parties to urge their supporters to tamp down some of the worst excesses, some of the worst rhetorical excesses we're seeing, even from some of the political platforms? You hear comments, for example, from the Prime
I do
Minister.
agree.
Yeah, please proceed.
Yes, I said I do agree. Um,
Mhm.
we need to lift the standard of politics in the country on both sides. And at one point in time, I looked up to NDC, especially the old NDC. For that, I felt that we have always tried to take the high road, but now, especially with the new leader, I see similar rantings and so forth taking place, and of course, I
Similar
don't see
rantings
him
from the
coming
new
out
leader.
with. Yes, in the sense that not the comments, but in the sense that you see in, for example, he would go in a political rally, and of course he would give back jab to Dr. Mitchell, the leader of the NNP, about take susu in you. I'm sure you would have seen it. So I mean, I remember when Burke and Tillman was leaders. I can't remember them sort of responding in those instances. Um, but yes, I do believe that as especially as politicians, we have to try and encourage supporters that way. One of the things that really caught my attention, and I must give him credit, is that a couple of the rallies that I have attended and look on, most recently with the NNP, in terms of the General Secretary, Roland Bowler, while he has been chairing some of the meetings, I have heard him literally telling NNP supporters, please do not get involved in the bantering and the rantings that's taking place on social media. Do not get involved in it. Refrain from making attacks and so forth and going down that road. And I think kudos must be given to him. It doesn't, even if for some reason supporters do not take his advice, but the point is at least he is at that high level, right, in terms of the leadership of the party and as the general secretary, and he's actually helping to give guidance to the membership and the supporters. And I think that needs to take place on both sides, in all political parties, because of course there are new political parties now being launched and so forth, like
Mhm.
Power and so forth. And I think we constantly have to re-emphasize that. And we also have to re-emphasize to supporters that this is competitive politics. And so, if someone, we have seen people switch from different sides and have changed from time to time, given for whatever reasons, people have their reasons, whether you agree with it or not. And that does not mean that because someone who may have been in your party have gone to another party, that you should all of a sudden just decide to drag them in the mud. I mean, I see, I see, especially there's one strong supporter of NDC. She's all over her Facebook page, talking about she defended me, and now she's going to drag me. And so every day she gets up with that intention every morning, I have to say, because I look at it, and she would put up a post and she keep trying to drag me. But here I'm still living, I'm still walking with my head high. I'm not going to be bothered with that. I mean, she's in the diaspora. If I were to ever go to the diaspora or I see her here in Grenada, I'll still tell her hello, because I understand that, you know, it's the camp, it's silly season, and so they're doing what I guess they feel is best in their best interests, which is
All right.
unfortunate.
Now, Mr. Dowden, talk to us about your own future political ambitions beyond this election cycle. I know that you have narrowly defined the parameters of what you will be doing with respect to your endorsement of Mr. Nimrod Oliver in St. George Northeast. Where do you see yourself in the next 10 to 15 years on the Grenadian political landscape? Do you see yourself as becoming more involved in politics, or do you see this as sort of just a unique opportunity? Where does Ali Dowden see himself in the next decade or so?
Well, the truth is, no one knows what the future holds. Only the good master above, only the Almighty knows that. But I do believe, I do see myself as continuing to play a part in the political landscape here in Grenada and the governance process. It does not mean that I have to be in frontline competitive politics to do so, but I can be working along with candidates like I am doing in this election with Nimrod Olive, that I believe would become a great MP, not just for the constituents of St. George Northeast, but by and large, the rest of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit I think he will serve them well, both in a ministerial portfolio as well as in the parliament. And if for some reason I can make that small contribution, I feel like at least I am doing something, and I'm giving back to my country by ensuring that at least they're good representatives in the different constituencies. But more so, I'm focusing on St. George Northeast. So I'm someone, I take things in stages and in steps. I'm not in a rush. We will see. We'll see how things go in the future. But for now, my focus is on St. George Northeast and working with the candidate, because I know him and I believe that he will become a great representative for that constituency. I believe he has what it takes. He's a man of action, he's a man of progress, a man that's delivering for the people, and he's not even the MP as yet, and a man that has great love for people. I've been working along with him. I'm seeing NDC supporters asking for help, and I'm seeing him helping them. And I believe this is commendable. This is the sort of change that we want to see in all of our politicians, whereby help is given once you're a citizen of Grenada, and it is not done based on partisan political lines.
And to that point, that has been a concern, and I'm going to get to that. But that has been a concern in Grenada that we will address subsequent in a subsequent question. But you, Mr. Dowden, you said that you still admire Mr. Burke. Are you still in touch with those in the party, Mr. Burke? You said you admire Franca Bernardine, for example. Are you in touch with those folks that you've had a good rapport with in the past?
Well, to an extent, yes, and to an extent, no. In terms of Sister Franco, I last time I've seen her probably would have been at the beginning of the year, so I can't say that necessarily I'm in touch with her. As it relates to Comrade Nazim Book, I would say yes. The last time we spoke would have been about two weeks ago, thereabout. I took to the stage, I believe it was this Thursday, to endorse Nimrod, and I would have spoken to Mr. Burke the Tuesday when I made my mind up that I was going to fully endorse Nimrod. I thought that he was one of the persons that I should reach out to. As a matter of fact, he was the first person on my agenda. But it so happened, in terms of by making the phone calls and so forth and not being available, he turned out to be the third person that I would have had a conversation with.
Mhm.
Since then, I would have chatted with one or two other people before I took to the stage and shared with them my decision and sort of, got their perspective on it. So yes, I am still in touch with one or two of the people in NDC because I
So
don't
what?
believe. Sorry, you were
Go ahead,
saying
please.
something.
No, you go ahead,
Right.
please. I don't want to
For
filibuster.
example, the candidate for St. John, we're always in touch. Kireen James, it's someone I admire, right? I believe she's a genuine soul. It's someone that I have known for a number of years. So we still continue to communicate. We would not let because I am supporting a candidate on the NNP side, that affect the relationship that we have, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that.
Mhm. So, what was the conversation like with Mr. Burke? I know that, as I've said before, Mr. Burke is someone that you really admire and look up to. What was that conversation like um, when you telegraphed your intention to support the opposing candidate in the Northeast? Of course, Mr. Burke was also the NDC candidate for the Northeast in several election cycles, um, having not won the previous two election cycles, but you also had an interest in endorsing Mr. Burke for leader. But I want to hear from you with respect to what the context of that conversation was like, if you're willing to share.
Right. Well, it wasn't a long conversation, to be honest. I shared with him my intention, and I let him know that as someone that I respect and I admire, I thought it was out of respect to at least reach out to him and let him know and to get his feedback on it. Of course, as a young man, he respected my decision. He may not have agreed with it, but he respected it, and I am grateful for that. And he would have given me some advice in terms of, to look out that there will be a backlash, so to expect that and to prepare myself for that. And of course, he reminded me that I'm someone that has always been loyal to him and work along with him, and that he always admired my love for people and the contribution that I have made towards the NDC, and also working along with him while he was leader. And he also made the point. He pointed out that let this not affect the relationship that we have. And of course, I let him know that it will not affect the relationship that we have. We will continue to chat. We will continue to share ideas
Mhm.
and find common goals.
All right. Now, help me to understand the timeline, Mr. Dowden. So, you resigned from the party in late August of 2021. The NDC convention was not held until October of 2021. I believe the 31st of October was that convention date. Was your resignation a consequence of the new entrance into the party? Or were you disillusioned with the party before that? And if and part of that question, the second part of that question has to do with the timeline with respect to the entrance of 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 the new recruits, if you will, into the organization as well. What was that timeline like? And
Okay.
did that timeline flavor sort of your decision to resign?
So to start off with, when I resigned from the party, it literally had nothing to do with the new entrance into the party. The party began a process which it has always done. It has always held an open door policy, I believe, at the time to welcome people into the party to try and have new recruits. And I have always been active in that regard. And so it could have been around April, May of 2021, the party was approached by a group of young Grenadians, some young people, and I remember the general secretary and the acting leader of the party at the time, Adrian Persuader Thomas, they were the ones really charged with that responsibility of engaging them. And so around July of that year, some of them would have decided to take out membership in the NDC. And so they applied for membership and became members. During that time, of course, I served on management and I served on executive and also Stratcom, which is the strategy committee of the party. While all of that was taking place, the party started to find itself, at least at the management level, um, at another period of infighting, and I found that to be very unfortunate because
Stick a
I
pin there. Stick a pin there. Was that in the first quarter of 2021?
so that was August. Well, of course, that would have been well. First of all, we had a very rough period around the time when Franca resigned,
Mm-hmm.
right? To start off with, we had a very there was some infighting that started since back then, and I would say that it continued up to my resignation. I would recall that when Franca just before she resigned, we received two resignation letters at the time. That would have been of Ron Redhead and Tevin Andrew. I clearly recall the morning when Tevin called me. I was in the kitchen having breakfast with Nenny, and he called and he started cussing, so to speak, using the F sharp, asking, telling me why did I bring him into the party, and look, he fed up and so on. And I told him to calm down, right? And then he told me what was his decision, and look, he would have just resigned. Of course, management meet after that. Ron would have resigned right after that as well. Within when Tevin resigned, the next day Ron resigned, and of course, management. We had a management meeting to discuss it, and we did not accept the resignations, and we asked them to hold off on it. Of course, then we had the Franca Bernadine period when she would have resigned because all that time we started to find ourselves in battling fights. And of course, after Franca left,
Her
I
reasoning
think
then
our
was
focus then started to try.
mhm. Her reasoning then was ill health,
Sorry.
or her reasoning then was ill health. That was the reason why she resigned. Was there more to that than just ill
Yes, but
health?
that had nothing to do that had nothing to do with ill health, unfortunately.
Okay.
That had nothing to do with ill health. The party found itself with serious internal conflict at that management level at the time, and so she was asked to step aside, right? And I recalled the upheaval that we had to get her to resign, and then eventually she said she would accept, she would resign, and she wanted to have her doctors and so forth with her at the press conference. But the party didn't feel that that was necessary, and of course the excuse that was given was ill health. So of course we went along with it, and we then tried to see how we can stabilize the party again because of course you're talking about Franco would have just become a leader within a year. There's a resignation, and now the party is sort of leaderless. So the deputy, we had to ask the deputy obviously to step in and act as the leader, the interim leader, and that would have been Adrian Persuader Thomas. But during that time, I felt it was unfortunate that while our efforts should be spent stabilizing the party and getting the party then into a convention and, of course, recruiting new members, that we found ourselves once again fighting. So the fighting that started under Franco leadership, it continued because there and then you had, when management make a decision, you're having the PRO of the party at the time, which was the candidate for the town of St. George, deciding that she would not go ahead with it. So there were times when we had to put out press releases, when we had press conferences to take place, and of course you're talking about she would object to it and give different reasons. I'm of the view that when management makes a decision, after we all would have discussed it, right? Then we must implement those decisions. And I felt that it became, by August, it really became tiring for me. I felt we were going wrong and wrong in circles. And so I submitted a resignation letter. I never shared it with the public. But in my resignation letter, it pointed out my reasons that one, I felt that the party has lacked direction, right? That two, there was a lot of infighting, and that was due to petty personal agendas, because here it is that management would decide that we're going one way, and then you would have individual members making their own decisions that they're not going to carry out the directives of management, that they would do their own thing. And so I found that at the point in time that the party really had lacked leadership as well, because I found that different people were trying to show themselves up to be the next leader of NDC instead of working and helping to promote the interim leader, which is Adrian Persuader Thomas, as the leader at the time, at that point in time in the life of the party. So I really became very tired by August. And I decided that I was going to call it a day. I would support the party, I would be a supporter, but I would resign as a member and take a back seat and probably try to look at things from a different lens. And so that is when I would have resigned. It was it was a very strange period, I must say. I just received an email saying thanks for your services. And I left it as that, and I continued to make my contributions wherever I could from in the background.
Very proud of what you're doing, and I think it's much needed. So thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you again for watching the Bubb Report. Viewers and listeners, we want to thank you sincerely. Ashley, thank you so very much. Senator Chester Humphrey, welcome to the Bubb Report. Mr. Mitchell, welcome to the program. The Honorable Jumani Williams, we call him Jumani, who is the public advocate for the city of New York. The Honorable Basdio Pandey, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Pandey, welcome to the Bubb Report of Grenada. The Honorable Tobias Clement. Mr. Clement, welcome to the Bubb Report. Is it Nikoli or Nikolai? I hope I pronounced it.
Nikolai.
It's Nikolai. Thank you.
Yes.
And welcome to the program, Her Excellency Ambassador Luan Gilchrist. Mr. Randall Robinson, you are here in your private capacity and in your personal capacity. Yesterday, we learned that you were detained by law enforcement in Grenada. So you come from a family of public servants.
Yes, we are a family of public servants.
So you're saying that you have to do more, but my question is, what have you done as President of the Union to ensure that that happens?
To the cards that I have drawn, that I am the minister at this point in time. And for members of the public...
But you're also a servant of the people. Why would we have ambassadors representing the state that do not understand clearly what their terms of reference are? So you were in the background. I'm trying to understand, because on another platform you were able to divulge some internal issues with respect to the goings on, if you will, of the new entrants into the party. So
yes,
where,
and I will get,
where does that come
get to
in?
that.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's different stages to this, right?
Yes.
So this took place in August with my resignation. And then, as I said, I still remain a supporter of the party and supported whatever efforts that it may have. Now, the party then was heading into from by around September, middle September, the date or so was given when the convention would take place and the process that would follow. And so at the point in time, there was a section of the supporters and membership of the NDC that was calling for the return of Mr. Nazimbo to be the leader of the party. They felt that there was a need for someone with experience to lead the party and who would be able to stabilize the ship and get it ready for the upcoming election, which was expected within a year or two, right? And so I was approached by some of those members, some in the diaspora and some here, and we formed ourselves into a committee. And we would have met with Mr. Book and so forth and get his view on it. And so we used to meet. and we started to prepare for when the process came, for nomination, that we would nominate him on the floor, right? We would nominate him on the floor, and let the delegates decide that who they will vote for. So that was what was taking place. But during that time, I recalled that when Mr. Mitchell came into the party at the point in time, he said that he wanted to work with committees of the party, right? The UTAM, the Welfare Committee of the party, and other committees, and then eventually work his way up, right? He was asked if he was interested in the leadership, and he said no. So within about, you're talking about July, so August, September, October. So within about 3 months, 2 to 3 months, I found it was a little bit odd when he decided that he was going to put himself up for leadership. I wanted to figure out what has changed. I guess probably maybe I had a little bit of journalistic instinct in me. I don't know. I wanted to probe. So yes, on a serious note, I had a conversation with him. I tried to figure out what have changed. And then he told me what have changed. He said that the general secretary at that point in time would have had a conversation with Nazim Burke. And from that conversation, the general secretary picked up that it seems like Mr. Burke wanted to make a return to frontline politics and become the leader of the NDC. And so he then called Mr. Mitchell, that's the general secretary at the time. He then called Mr. Mitchell and encouraged him and tell him that he should put himself up for the leadership of the party. And then Mr. Mitchell said he decided that he would think about it, and he gave it about a day or two thought, and then he got back and he said, yes, he will go for it. At that point in time,
I'm not meaning to cut your trend of thought here. So when the Prime Minister of Grenada says that Mr. Mitchell bought the party, you do not subscribe to the view that Deacon, as a result of him allegedly buying the NDC at that stage, that he wanted to be political leader off the bat.
So yeah, so when he came in, right, I don't think that conversation necessarily took place. But eventually, by the time it got to the leadership stage, I know that the conversation would have changed, because of course I still had eyes and ears on the inside. I mean, we were leading up to a convention, and of course you would have had people on management and executive who would have known that what was taking place, and they would have shared what they needed to share, right? So we knew by then, when the convention came around, that Mr. Mitchell started to put his team together as to who he would want to be PRO and who he would want to be treasurer of the party and so forth, and the different conditions that were set out. I don't need to go into detail on that. But I do believe that there's some, I wouldn't say that he bought the party, but based on whatever contribution that needed to take place, probably to help pay out some of the debts and so forth of the party, that leadership may have tilted in favor of one person, so to speak. So anyways, getting back to what I was saying. So of course, we were leading up to the convention, right? So in my conversation with him, when he said what was his reasons now for becoming the leader of the NDC and putting forward himself, I asked him a question. I said to him, you know that there's a strong possibility that that Mr. Burke may be nominated on the floor on convention day, and there's a strong possibility that the delegates will support him, will vote for him, right? Given, of course, their loyalty to him, and of course he has been with the NDC a very long time. He was deputy political leader, he then became political leader and so forth.
But he was also unsuccessful in 2 election cycles. He was not able to bring the party to victory.
But that does not necessarily say anything about an individual in terms of strength and so forth. You have over in Antigua the current leader of the UPP. He came and spoke on our platform, the NDC platforms before. He also lost badly. He lost his seat on 2 consecutive elections. I believe
Mr.
he
Baldwin
was the deputy
Spencer,
leader
yes?
to Baldwin.
Oh, the deputy
No, that
to
is
Baldwin Spencer. Okay.
He was the deputy to Baldwin Spencer, right? And when they lost around 2013 thereabout, he would have lost his seat. That's Harold Lovell, right? And then they would have ran again, I think 2013, and he would have lost again. And at that point in time, he was leader. And now again, the party chose that they had their own leadership contest, and the party chose to keep him on as leader, and he's now preparing for a next election. It seems like they may have it end of this later this year or early next year, but it's due by next year. I say that to say that not because someone may have lost twice mean that they cannot lead the party. I do not subscribe to that at all. I mean, we all know of Tillman Thomas' history and so forth, and yet for all, he led the party to victory with help in 2008 and almost did it in 2003. And he also won a seat. He would have lost a seat before on an election, one election or two before. So I do not subscribe to that school of thought that if it is that you would have lost an election, that you cannot necessarily come back as a leader. He was not the leader when we lost in 2013. He was only the leader when we lost in 2018. But however, I felt that the party still performed better in that election in the sense that we had an increase in votes, whether it was by 1,000 plus. And we did quite considerably well in some of the constituencies, at least 8 of the constituencies, where we saw increase in voters voting for our candidates. I also believe that at that point in time, the party started a sort of transformation in terms of seeing younger candidates and newer faces coming on board. And I also subscribed to his school of thought by having a marriage, a mixture of both the young people and also the older heads in terms of experience. And I believe that to me is very important, a very important ingredient in leadership, not just in politics, but in managing a company, a corporation, whatever it may be. You need to have that continuity, but you also have to have that guidance. And I remember he would have shared with many of us in the party his views on the revolution and how things would have gone. And he also believed that, this was a time to do things differently, and that if we can find the right marriage between those with experience as well as those the younger people who bring that form of energy and vibrancy and creativity and innovation, that we could really make Grenada a dynamic society for all. And so hence the reason why I've always bought into his view. But yes, so getting back to what I was saying, so that's the reason why I still admire the gentleman up to this day. So I felt, of course, when supporters started to call for him, I felt that, listen, if this gentleman was given a second chance, and for some reason, things may be better. And I felt that the country needed that sort of mixture of a team, not just all youths or all older heads, but that mixture. And so I of course was very much happy to see him come back. And so in speaking with Mr. Mitchell, when I told him about what might have the possibility of the outcome that can take place in the convention flow, that if Mr. Buck shows up and the delegates nominate him and vote for him, and for some reason he becomes a leader, would you then accept the role of deputy leader? Because I also thought it would be great for the party in the sense that no, should he decide in the future that he wants to become, or not wants, but become the leader, at least there would have been some form of training and political experience, and he would have also learned and woke himself up, his way up. I felt he was fresh and new to politics. He was not necessarily have a background in it. He hasn't run, he hasn't really played any key role within a political organization before. And so that was my thinking at the time when I asked him the question if he would accept deputy, because I've gone to conventions on more than one occasion, and sometimes someone would put themselves up for a post and they do not get that post, and then the delegates would nominate them for another post, right? And they would accept. So I asked him, and the answer he gave me, it really troubled me. He said, no, I would not accept, I would not be deputy to Mr. Burke. That was the first time he said it. So when we started to have the Zoom meetings, we started to have these Zoom meetings whereby the different candidates that were running for the different positions on the executive, that they would have a debate. They would be able to share their vision for the party and for that specific post that they're running for, and their plans. And I decided to ask him again the question to see if, because it would have been a couple of weeks that I would have first asked him. And I thought maybe his thoughts might have changed. And if his thoughts didn't change, and for some reason Bubb becomes the leader and the delegates choose to vote him in as a deputy leader, then they must know that there seems that we're going to have some issues here because of what I know that he said he didn't want to work with him. So I asked him the question, and he repeated it, and he even added on to it. He said straight out, he said no. He said I would not be deputy. I would be deputy to no one. And I think that threw a lot of us off, some of us who were looking on. And I think a lot of us then decided, okay, you know what? Let us leave these guys. Let them do what they want, so to speak, right? And let us just take a back seat and look on. And that took place after the convention. So when he became leader and so on, there were some of us who felt that we should take a back seat because we don't know how he sees us. And so that took place. And of course, he never one day reached out to me, right? He never one day reached out. At the time, I was still looking over the constituency of St. George Northwest. A new caretaker was chosen. Of course, I would have indicated that I was not going to put myself up to run for St. George Northwest again. So that was a well-known fact. But one would have thought, at least as the leader and as a former caretaker, you would reach out and have that conversation and see how we can bring the branch together so that we can have an election for the new caretaker that's coming in. None of that took place. The new caretaker was not able to meet with the membership of St. George Northwest and have any election. He was just sort of chosen from the leadership and just put on to the members. And so I found a lot of those things unfortunate. And I looked at how he treated his deputy, right? I've always been in conversation with the deputy. I remembered when he became leader, one of the first things he did was that he went and opened a constituency office, right, in his deputy leader's constituency. And I found that was very disrespectful to the deputy leader. And he then invited the deputy leader to come and cut the ribbon. So I remember I had a conversation with Persuade and I said, how could you allow that? How did your conscience allow that? My conscience would not allow that, right? At least we would have had to have a conversation before. I would need to know what is your thinking. How could you just come and open an office and invite me and think I should just show up and cut a ribbon? I see that as a form of disrespect, especially as someone who would have contributed to the organization, who was there with the organization on 2 back-to-back loss, and remained loyal in the rebuilding process and made considerable personal sacrifices. It came at a lot for us. And he said, he was doing it because of the party. And within a couple of days, then he resigned as a caretaker. And I thought to myself, he probably decided that he came to his senses and realized where this thing was going. And I know we would have had conversations. We chat about it and so forth. And then he decided he was going to take a sabbatical. So he wrote to the party. And as far as I know, he's on a sabbatical. You look at the town hall meetings that's taking place in the leader's constituency, you're not seeing a deputy. Most recently, of course, it seems like with me, now that they're seeing, and it's not just me, there are other people who are appearing on platforms in the local constituencies that was on NDC executive, like small acts and so forth. You're not seeing, you've seen them coming out. There's others that I know will be joining the platform soon that will be coming out. So I'm not the only one. I'm probably the only one that probably sat on management and was a candidate, so to speak, before. But there are others who are going to be coming out, who was chairman in constituency branches and so forth. I guess it started to become conscious of them that they now he has to make the extra effort to reach out to some of the people that he probably would have pushed aside. So now you're seeing Persuader showing up on a stage, and so not speaking, but showing up on a stage. But those were the things that really helped me to make up my mind, and I realized, listen, this is not the NDC that I knew before. I looked at constituencies where instead of elections for the candidates were taking place, you saw confusion, you saw people being handpicked and so forth. I always thought that the NDC was a party that prided itself on strong democratic principles. And I decided, listen, it was time to just forget politics, forget NDC. But then, of course, knowing Mr. Nimrod, There were people that was close to him, friends, family, and I know him. One of his stepbrother is married to one of my niece. One of his best friends is also married to one of my niece, and so I've known the work that he have done. We have worked before. He have shipped medical supplies to this country. I tend to be in the field of health from a charitable perspective, so I know him. I've seen him doing stuff in the constituency of St. George Northwest, giving back to the youngsters in sporting clubs with uniform and sponsoring boots and so forth. I see him making contributions to the Royal Grenada Police Force, because that's the sort of field of work that he was engaged in. And so I looked at that, and then of course I decided, listen, I can support this man. I can give him my personal support because I believe that he will make a big difference in the constituency. Of course, I also happen to know the candidate that's running for the NDC in that constituency. And of course, I would have worked along with him because we both would have been a part of the UTAM, would have been on the executive, and would have also been on management. And I am fully well aware that some of the issues that we faced in the NDC at the time, that he should shoulder some of the blame, because it was him along with one or two other young people, even the candidate for Karakou, that helped constantly fuel the infighting. Because when we would take a decision that we're going in a certain direction, that some of these young people decided that no, they're going to go in their own direction. And it became worse last year when they started this Youth for Change with Mr. Jones and his program. And I remember the party decided that we needed to counteract it, because supporters and members was reaching out and they started to get concerned. They thought that, listen, it wasn't looking good for the party. It looked like we were having infighting again. Here it is that the young people are having their own meetings, and here it is that NDC was not saying anything. And so we decided that we would have our own meetings. And we asked them to show up on the platform. And on all occasions, I think Tevin came down once, to the best of my knowledge. But Mr. Redhead decided that no, we were all GAD, and that he didn't want to associate himself and his brand of politics with that whole GAD. And I found those things to be very, very unfortunate, because I believe when I'm a part of a team, we must be a team player. We can have our internal conversations and fights, but when we come out to the public, at least we should show a united front. I believe that is the best way. At least it would help the organization at the time.
Executive has chosen a caretaker for the constituency of South St. George's. And if that's the case, all of us have to abide by the directive of the party. We may not agree with it. There are a number of decisions that the NMP party has made over the years that I didn't agree with, but I don't just get up and decide to oppose it publicly, and decided to go against it to the point that I am out there actively campaigning and telling the leadership of the party, including the chairman, for example, that no one will stop him. That if the party does not give him the authority to run, he will run as an independent. So I don't know, in the face of this, that while there is a disciplinary process that may have to be involved, but that's a separate issue. But the whole question of being able to represent the party, the government on specific policy-making decision certainly becomes a problem. But the fact is, the two boards that, so far as that had been moved on from Nawasa, it was up for renewal, and it's a fact. And the other one was the Financial Complex Board, which was, it should have been, the change should have occurred weeks ago or months ago. It was an oversight on our part that it was not done. So it was a convenient time for us, and I made a point already. I don't see how Terry could have expected to continue chairing boards of a policy nature when he took the position against the party and government.
This last 5 years, I have given them the benefit of the doubt. I have tried, I've suggested, I've recommended, I've put it in writing, I've said it in the newspapers. And I am convinced that the new National Party is not interested in the health of Grenadians. They're not interested in people. And as a result, I am here tonight to tell Grenadians to think carefully. Think about your health situation, and you have to think seriously about the decisions we make on March 13. We all know that Grenada has been going through a lot of struggles over the years. There are a lot of people in Grenada who are still living in conditions which is not consistent with what our expectations were. As I was introduced, when I was 19, Maurice Bishop called me and asked me to perform a function in Cuba. I was 19 years old, and today we are telling young people that they are the future. Wait, but no, you are the present. You can contribute more, and you have to take action now.
We are almost running out of time here. Did you want to add something quickly? Because I have two more questions before we end this segment.
No, we can end it right here.
Yeah, I mean you said a lot, and so the final, well, the two final questions. How would you assess the current administration with respect to its performance in office, and have you also had an evolution with respect to how you view the administration?
So I believe that in this term of governance, especially 2013 to now, but more so 2018 to now, I believe that the government has been delivering on a lot of its promises. I believe it's a government at work. It has shown that it remained united and stable. It has provided quite stable leadership and governance for the country during that period. I'm able to look back at being in NDC and fear what may have happened if we had won in 2018, after, of course, experiencing what followed after with some of us in the party. But I looked at the government, I looked at its management of COVID, and I believe that it should get a passing grade. I would not say that I would have agreed with every policy decision or every idea that they put out there, but I believe they were able to keep us safe, that they were able to keep the economy afloat during all that. At that time, when you're talking about the revenues in the country were down, at that point in time, they were still able to maintain their social safety net programs and even expand it. There were people who were unemployed that got unemployment benefits. Salaries were paid on time. Pensioners received their pensions on time. They have also made great strides in healthcare. I mean, right now the government is testing it. It now has a CT scanner, and they're carrying out all their tests and so forth. Soon, at least, that's going to benefit us as Grenadians. No longer would we have to go to a private institution that will cost more. I know that they have been doing a lot of work in the field of dialysis. And getting the dialysis unit at the hospital set up. And I know it's within the next few weeks, we will see that start, and that will reduce the cost of dialysis considerably for our patients here in Grenada. And our patient would be able to get the recommended 3 treatments, and at least they would have a longer life expectancy. So in the area of health, I have seen significant improvements in that regard. And of course, the new infrastructure in Guav, which is almost like a mini hospital. I believe once it's properly staffed and functional with the proper equipment, that will do, it will transform that western side of the island in terms of healthcare delivery. So I see that. In the area of housing, the government is delivering. I personally do not necessarily subscribe to the Chinese model of housing, while I understand it. But I am the person who always
Why don't you subscribe to that
I like my own.
Why don't you subscribe to the Chinese model?
Because I happen to like my own land space. I happen to look at the culture that we have, we tend to play our music loud. Not that I play music loud, but we tend to do that. We tend to have our own space. I also like where I can put on a downstairs and I can generate some income. Maybe because I'm a real estate agent, I understand that and I can pay my mortgage or so forth. I like my own land space where I can do stuff. But I believe that there need to be a mixture of it. I also understand the reasoning behind it, because I mean there's only so much land space we have as well, right? So while I may not subscribe to it, it doesn't mean that I'm in disagreement with it, and I hope we understand that. But at least I'm seeing them delivering in
But
housing, and not just Chinese housing.
you
They're
should be free.
doing
You should be free
bathroom
to
and
I mean, even though you are now on the other side, I don't think if you disagree with it that they would
well,
punish you
I'm not I
for
have
holding
not
a
applied
different
for
view.
membership in the NNP, but I believe that I remain entitled to my own independent view, even if I
Mhm.
decide to become a member of NNP. When I was in NDC, I was also entitled. I always held my own view as well, and I think that everyone. I mean, I don't think everyone in NNP agrees with every idea or every plan of Dr. Mitchell, but at least there's always that need for to work together. We must disagree on things, but we also agree on other stuff and we work together. So yes, so in housing, I'm seeing progress. I'm seeing a buoyant economy in terms of on the construction side of things. In terms of tourism, I think tourism is on the rebound. I'm really happy, to be honest. I understand that there may be environmental concerns and so forth, but I'm really happy to see that now we're shifting some of our focus into the rural areas outside of the parish of St. George. So I'm happy to see that 2 hotels and the possibility of a third one may soon be a reality for the people of St. David, and I believe it will bring a lot of benefits. It will bring jobs. No longer will somebody from St. David's have to leave and come down to St. George's to get a job in a hotel. Same for the people of St. Andrew. It's now closer. You're talking about dive shops would be set up, other businesses within that area. Talking about taxi men, bus operators, people in the entertainment industry, those who play music and so on. They will find jobs. So I'm grateful, and I think that's also a good way to start to shift development. So I feel like they are delivering in many areas, and I think that the government should be given kudos, even at a time when we're seeing the great crisis that's taking place with Russia and Ukraine, when we're seeing cost of living and prices are going up. And then, of course, we're still in a COVID period. Yes, we're coming out of it, but we're still feeling the effects of it. And yet, for all, the government is still being able to deliver in that regard. I'm not against the upgrade and expansion of the airport. I understand the need for that. Many times I disagreed with some of the things that we do in terms of when I was in NDC, because I believe at times we just decided that once it's an NP or Dr. Mitchell, that we'll just oppose it for opposing its sake to try and score a political point. And I have never subscribed to that idea. I believe once it's good for the country, we must support it. So yes, I believe that the government is I'm not going to say it's a perfect government. I'm not looking for a perfect government. But at least I believe it's keeping us afloat. People are finding jobs, and I do believe that I'm seeing improvements taking place in the country.
And finally, Mr. Dowden, there are some who argue that there is a culture of fear in Grenada relative to speaking out against the administration, and how that can affect real world and real life outcomes with respect to opportunities that you can obtain, with respect to opportunities for jobs, scholarships, and there are some who choose to self censor as a result of that perception of a culture of fear. Your thoughts on that culture of fear that the ruling administration is said to have brought about in Grenada?
All right, and I think you rightfully said it. It's a perception, right? Is it reality? I am not so sure.
Well,
I
we
ran
do have
against Dr. Mitchell.
sorry, I don't want to cut you, but we do have anecdotal evidence from various communities that, for example, there are people who would not even appear on the Bubb Report. I can tell you that much. And they'll be like, I don't want to come on your program, boss man, because, I do not want to appear to be addressing a particular issue because, I have to watch my pocket at the end of the day. But please proceed.
Right, and I understand that, but who is to say that if they were to appear on your program or they come out and speak against the government or say something that may not be in line with the government, who is to say that for some reason that they would be punished or maligned, right? I think that is a fair. I'm not so sure if it's fully justified. I've been on the other side, and I cannot necessarily say I've been maligned, so to speak, in the sense of I'm still able to find a job, I'm still able to speak out. I think that there's people who may not be that bold to do so, but yes, there is that perception, and rightly so. Maybe at certain times, yes, some people do get affected by politics because you're not supporting a certain party. But I think that goes on both sides. I think Terry Forrester can answer that question best when he
Regardless
was
of
the
which,
PRO of NNP and NDC came into office.
regardless of which side it's happening, don't you think that that is a problematic way of governance? That your constitutional right for free
It
speech.
is problematic, and I
Yeah.
agree with you. And I agree with you on that. It is problematic, and it's something that we need to stamp out from our politics on both sides. But I just want to make the point that it takes place on both sides of the aisle. Maybe on one side, the perception might be that it's a little bit more prominent, but maybe because that party has been in office for the longest time. But it happens
Quantitatively
in our
so, yeah.
politics, and it's not just
Yeah.
Grenada. You see it in all the countries. I'm someone that I follow politics. You ask me when the next election is going to take place, especially for a country in the region, and I can tell you because I'm following. So it happens on all sides of the political spectrum, and it's not just unique to Grenada. But I believe, and I want to encourage that the new politicians that are coming and getting involved in politics, that they ought to do everything in their power to stamp out that approach, and to change the perception of politics, and to show that once you're a Grenadian, a Caracunian, or a Petit Martinican, that at least once there you must get help. You're a citizen of the country, and it does not matter which side you are on.
Absolutely. Mr. Dowden, thank you so much for your appearance on the Bubb Report. I know that this is a busy campaign season, and I know that you also working with the candidate there in Mr. Nimrod Oliver in St. George Northeast. So thank you for taking the time to appear on the Bubb Report this week.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I take the opportunity to encourage the citizens to pay attention, follow the election campaigns, read the manifestos, look at both sides, and of course, the people of St. George Northeast, do the right thing. Support a good man, support the candidate for St. George Northeast, Mr. Nimrod Olive. Thank you for having me on your program, Dr. Bubb.
Absolutely, Mr. Dowden. It was a pleasure having you here for the very first time. Certainly, it's you do good work with respect to the Kidney Foundation, and I think and that other organization, the name is slipping me now, but I think that is important.
Yes, I mean, Cancer
that is
Society.
important. The Cancer Society, and that is important work. Regardless of which side of the political fence you are, one must be commended for helping those who are in medical need. We do have a serious a medical situation in Grenada, and when people like yourself come forward to assist that need in some way, I think it should be commended. So, Mr. Dowden, thank you for your appearance on the report. And viewers and listeners, that was Mr. Ali Dowden. Mr. Ali Dowden, he says he's not a card-carrying member of the New National Party. We will be watching that space, of course, but Mr. Dowden is campaigning for the NNP candidate in the neighboring St. George Northeast constituency.